And you're listening to The Breakfast Show here on Faith FM. You're joined by myself, Lawson. We got Dr. Dan in the studio as well this morning. And we are going to be diving into, I'm very interested in this news, this good news that you have to share with us.
So we're talking about what's happening in Bondi and whatever.
Yeah.
But I want to share some really good things that God is doing maybe I should or shouldn't connect particular regions of the world or particular religions with what's going on, but God doesn't respect persons or religions. He is reaching people all around the world and in all walks of life. And I just wanted to share, and this isn't particularly new news, but it's something that happens regularly, and that it's been featured in a news story recently, that God is working in Islamic countries to share with Muslims dreams of Jesus.
Wow. Hey, that's incredible. Dreams for Jesus. So you have to be listening out for that one. Before we dive head first, Producer Shell, we need a quiz question.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Yes, let's do our next quiz question for today, which is, what did Mordecai discover at the king's gate? What did Mordecai discover at the king's gate?
All right. I was getting too excited to share my good news story.
Yeah, you got to get your head in the right box here. What did Mordecai discover at the king's gate? From the book of Esther, 0491064669. We got a correct answer from Lawson.
And I'm stumped.
And, Livo's not sure yet.
All right.
We'll give him a moment. But I'll read that one out one more time. What did Mordecai discover at the king's gate? 0491064669. Play along with us. Text in what you think the answer is.
What's hard about this is that you can't classify it as a thingy. You can't call it a thingy. It's not a thingy.
That's true. So, Lawson, you would not have been able to answer a thingy.
That's right.
And get this right. I did think it came to me, but it wasn't a thingy that came to me.
It's not a thingy.
I don't know. I feel like it could still be
A thingy?
a thingy.
It could be a thingy. It could. Well, I think thingy usually relates itself to like an.
Actions can also be a thingy.
Okay.
Is that a hint right there?
That's a massive hint. So it was actions. It wasn't an object. There you go. That's the hint this morning. 0491064669. Just a few quick text messages. Wayne writes in. He says, I'm meant to win. And this is, of course, for the birthday draw that we are having today. If you are born in December, send through your date of birth to 0491064669 and we'll make sure you're in that draw, which we are spinning today. You can win either a cookbook or a board game or a Bible or a $50 voucher or dinner with a host. We want to give any one of those prizes to you if you win the draw. But the only way to win the draw is if you're born in December and you send through your day and month of birth. We've also got Deborah on the text line who said, hey, it's my birthday this month. Breakfast crew, can you please put me in the draw? She's on the 30th. So between the Christmas, New Year's Eve, right before New Year's Eve. So good on you, Deborah. We'll chuck you in the draw. Now, hey, people are having dreams.
People are having dreams, yeah. And this is awesome. So, as I've said before, God is not a respecter of persons, of race. God isn't pro-Semitic or anti-Semitic or pro, one part of the world or anti. He loves everyone and has a desire to reach everyone. So, there's people in Muslim countries having dreams about Jesus, and there's lots of stories that come in about this. I'm just going to share a couple of them from Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan, okay.
Yeah. So there's a guy that was just living his normal life as a Muslim, and he didn't know much about Christianity, but he had this dream, and Jesus, in fact, it was a recurring dream, and this man in white, he didn't know who it was, kept coming and saying, "Follow me," and so this kind of disturbed and moved him, and he didn't know what to do with it. So eventually he went to a Christian friend and asked him who this might be. And the Christian friend showed him a picture of Jesus. Of course, we don't have any photography from 2,000 years ago.
On the scene, pictures.
But whatever the artist that drew this picture of Jesus corresponded with the picture of Jesus that he had in his mind from this dream of this man in white appearing to him. And he realized, okay, this is who was coming to me in my dreams. And, and so he searched the Bible and put his faith in Christ. And even at the cost of his reputation, his family, his livelihood, his safety, he was willing to let go of all of that and follow Jesus.
Yeah. Was this guy a family man? Like, did he have a wife and kids? Does it have that info?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure on the detail.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure he did. And so there was another story of a Muslim woman who she was quite ill, and she had gone through medical treatments and diagnoses, and they were all falling short, and so. In a dream, she saw Jesus standing beside her bed and telling her not to be afraid, and that he was healing her. And, when she woke up, her symptoms were gone. And so, she was actually a bit confused and frightened by this, but obviously happy to be healed. And she was able to meet some Christians who explained to her who Jesus is, and then she realized that this person that had come to her in the dream and healed her was this Jesus that the Christians were talking about. And so she began to share Jesus with her family members, and they started to follow Jesus, even though in that society following Jesus had some pretty severe consequences. So
speak to those consequences. Are we talking like the government kills you, or like what does it look like for someone in that kind of situation to choose to follow Jesus?
Yeah, look, it can be as dire as losing your life. It can be, and that has happened in places around the world. And it's not that happens for a number of reasons, and there's a history of religious persecution, even Christian nations and people groups have meted out terrible persecution. This is part of the human problem that we tend to put ourselves in the place of God to tell people what they should or shouldn't do, and who deserves to live and who deserves not to, which is something that only God can do. But anyway, so these stories just show that God is working in all parts of the world for all people, and this seems to be happening more today. And I hear stories like this, from lots of people, lots of times in different countries. This seems to be a thing. God revealing Himself in dreams to Muslims in particular, but people anywhere. And even in my own little circle, I want to bring it back closer to Australia, close to home here in Australia. It's really interesting to see people coming to an understanding of God's truth through just things that you wouldn't, people or activity that you just wouldn't think would happen. And so at our church that you and I both go to, I was talking to a guy who's a Sunday keeper. He's been coming to my Sabbath school class where we've been doing a deep dive into those apocalyptic prophecy books of Daniel and Revelation. And we've been going through things that are like quite detailed, technical, and unique. The sanctuary message in prophecy, and I only just found out just a week ago that this guy he didn't have a background in understanding these prophecies. Went to a Sunday church, not particularly, denominational, just whatever Sunday church was around. But he'd been coming along to our church, and as we've been going through these truths, he said to me, and this connects with what I was sharing yesterday about Kirk Cameron. He said to me, "I've come to realise that this idea of an eternal hell just isn't biblical," and he came to that understanding himself, through studying the Bible with people that were sharing with him. But he just, God is leading people to a better understanding of biblical truth and who He is. And so we were sharing yesterday how Kirk Cameron, a famous, a prominent Christian leader who who had a history in acting, he's come to this understanding of hell, that eternal conscious torment in hell isn't what the Bible teaches. And so my friend at church also came to that realization through studying the Bible. Also, I've got a colleague at my workplace who she had stumbled across more understanding of Daniel and Revelation through her personal connections. And she was like, oh, okay, I need to understand this better. And so she was ready to read some serious theological books on this matter herself, doing a deep dive. And she basically read these books and became convicted on a number of things, on hell and the state of the dead, on the Sabbath, on the sanctuary, on prophecy, on all of these things, and basically said, I agree. I'm going to become a Seventh-day Adventist as a result of this. She read through, in a matter of just a couple of weeks, she read through Maxwell's God Cares, those two sets. Have you got those two sets of God Cares?
I don't, but
they are massive.
Huge.
Like, I have them, and for me, they're a reference.
Yeah.
And I've
not a novel.
I've sat down and read like a chapter, maybe.
Yeah.
But man, that's like hundreds and hundreds, like almost 1,000 pages of reading in just a short space of time on deep technical prophecy, but it all shows that God cares, and that's really the message that I want to share. God is revealing Himself to people in all around the world.
Yeah, wow, and in a lot of different, various ways as well. It's through people who need dreams, He gives them dreams. Through people who need hundreds of pages of very technical theological literature, like God is showing His truth to be true, and I think this is cool about what we're seeing in these movements or, these people's experiences as well, is that He's doing this amazing work to not only draw them to Himself, but to draw them to a higher and a greater truth as well. There's a bunch of stories that I could tell on this particular topic as well, how God is working in people's lives and just the miraculous way you see Him do that. But what I'm picking up here is it's happening everywhere. Like God is really active, and even in the places that we aren't, we're not, which is incredible. It's amazing. God is doing the work that He promised to do.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
Talking about myself and, of course, Dr. Dan on the mic with me, getting it done. Producer Shell, we need a quiz answer.
Indeed we do. So we were talking from the book of Esther. Mordecai discovered something at the king's gate. Some thingy at the king's gate. And that was a plot to assassinate the king.
A plan to...
A thingy about the kingy.
Yeah, that thing. You're right. What are the guys' names? One of them's name is... I think it's Big Than and Teresh. These two eunuchs who are hanging out there, and Big Than is such an awesome name, bro. I'm wanting to bring it back.
You're going to call your
kid. I hope I can. Dude, Big Than, that would honestly be the coolest name out. Yeah, I'm the Big Than. Like, dude, that would just be awesome. That would be awesome. But yeah, these guys.
Especially if the child turned out to be a runt.
Yeah, and there's a good chance of that. I mean, I'm not tall, and my wife isn't particularly tall either. Like, so, hey, maybe. But look, we'll see. But shut up. And if anything, then the name's ironic, right? Because he's small, we call him, Big Dan.
I often get the nickname Big Dan.
Big Dan. Yeah. There you go. Oh man,
I'm not big.
You're right there. Hey, look, well, awesome story from the Old Testament there. And a story actually, this terrible plot to kill the king was circumvented by, this work and great honesty and integrity on the part of Mordecai, where we have been speaking in these past couple of days about an unfortunately successful plot in Jewish just violence, like just a really gross, awful act of violence. Now, already, day one was really the reactions, particularly that night, Sunday night, was the reactions of, what do we do about this? From the PM the Minister for New South Wales, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, and these guys, and then now day two, it's kind of now suggestions of, well, how do we solve this problem? What can we do for the future? Investigations underway, people being arrested, these kinds of things. That's what's unfolding now. And there was a press release, an address from the Prime Minister, where there was a few suggestions made, a few things said that were very interesting that caught my attention. And that is that, the two men who perpetrated this, the son, so it was a father and a son. And the son, I believe, was on an ASIO watch list as early as 5 years ago, was investigated for 6 months, and then seen to not be a threat or a low terrorist threat. And so was able to, kind of not be investigated anymore, didn't have a real light shined on him. One of the big points of contention in the story is one of the big points that a lot of people are spotlighting, and also from the government and the police and whatnot, that this person was able to legally acquire a firearm. So they were able to get their gun license and buy a firearm despite being on a terrorist watch list, even at a low level. But they're able to go through those processes and steps, acquire a firearm, illegal firearms, by the way. And this is the other big aspect of it, is that this crime was perpetrated with two legal firearms, two firearms that were these weren't like automatic machine guns or anything like that. One was a rifle, the other was an over-under shotgun, which are both, legal to own if you're licensed. And so both of them, they had these arms, and then they perpetrated this crime. And the suggestion is being made now, which is, there is now a need, and this is coming from Anthony Albanese, not just the suggestion, but the plan. They will endeavour to, reform gun laws, and to the intention is to restrict the arsenal of people, essentially, or give people less. They can own less firearms, essentially. It's not a reclassification. They're not banning the guns that we use, but rather saying, hey, you can have less of those particular firearms. Now, personally, look, I'm not going to grandstand, on any side of the gun issue. I'm not particularly convicted either way. I have, friends and relatives who are gun owners. I've been able to, shoot a gun in my lifetime and whatnot for recreational purposes, shooting clay targets and that kind of thing. And which is a whole great deal of fun, actually, which I'll say, and whatnot. And I can see and I have uncles and whatnot that are really big hunters, and for good reasons as well, to clean up wildlife and invasive species, and
like pigs and
this kind of thing. And
even kangaroos. That there are times and places where kangaroos are out of control, eating all the grassland down, and the crops. So
you have necessary culling. Simultaneously, you see tragedies like this and the risk that comes with gun ownership or allowing people to be gun owners and whatnot. It's which can turn into something tragic and sad. But I will say this: look, Australia became famous for gun reform after the last mass shooting, which was, of course, in Port Arthur.
Yeah. And that's one of the key parts of John Howard's legacy is the gun reform.
That's right.
Post Port Arthur.
And now there is a gun reform. The gun reform being suggested by Anthony Albanese, which is, we're just going to lessen the amount of guns you can own. I think it's important to understand that there were two men with two guns, both of which won't be affected by legislation like that. And so even if you do what Anthony Albanese said, essentially this legislation
unless he restricts it to half a gun.
Yeah,
person.
like that's right. Like you can have a barrel and you can have a stock, and you can put it together.
They can only have barrels. Then you can't fire it.
That's right. Hey, ultimately, the point I'm trying to make is that, like, and a lot of the reaction to this initially is, how is this effectual in actually stopping something like this happening in the future? Like, unless you were to do like a widespread and total ban of guns, which there's, people that would suggest that wouldn't work either, because people would just keep their guns illegally and hidden away, as many people do already.
Yeah.
How does this actually solve anything? Particularly when these two guys didn't have like 100 guns on them to commit this crime. It was literally 2 weapons, to perpetrate this. And so how does this solve anything? And I think this is the big question. How do we even solve this issue? There's another group of people making suggestions. Hey, well, don't sell guns to people who are on a terrorist watch list, or which is fair to suggest. But then there will always be ways to circumvent this kind of legislation and to commit terrible crimes. Yes, legislation can come in that can deal with them, and I mean that can lower that number, and that's what we saw since Port Arthur. The amount of mass shootings has been very, very low. This is what we've seen compared to other countries with different gun laws, and we can celebrate that. And as you said, John Howard's legacy, it's a big point of celebration that, hey, like, he made this reform, and as a result, there was a marked decline in gun violence. But how do you actually solve this problem? Because, again, the massive restrictions that we already have, people worked within that frame to then go and kill 14 people and injure 40 others. How do you actually solve a problem like this? Can it even be solved? And this is the big question. What do we do with this kind of suffering and this kind of evil? And this is where we need to really, in a world that will never have the solutions to really get to the bottom of this and solve all of it and fix everyone, this is where we get into the spiritual realm. Firstly,
there's a number of different solutions in the policy realm that could be considered in addition to gun restrictions. And look, improving gun control, gun laws. It's a logical question to ask and a logical avenue. But there's immigration policy. There's how you integrate. Are we looking for to what extent are we wanting to be multicultural versus assimilating?
Yeah.
And there's questions around policy around that, and these are tough questions. No easy answers. And
how should ASIO invest? Yeah. How should ASIO investigate people that are on the terrorist watch list?
And that again, there's a balance there between privacy and invasion of privacy, and keeping us safe, and to what. Yeah. So these are tough questions.
And this is my point: is that I think that it's. As much as I'm like Anthony Albanese, like the suggestion that you made about tightening these gun laws and restrictions is like everyone is reacting to it negatively, because everyone is saying, like, how does this solve the problem when it really kind of doesn't? From all of these different perspectives, I feel like he's in a very hard position, because there's blind spots in every single change that he could make. This isn't necessarily just completely foolproof. Now, this is where the Bible comes in and says, hey, firstly, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Like those who are grieving right now, God is endeavoring to draw close to these people and to give them peace and to give them joy. But secondly, we see, how do we solve these problems of great injustice and violence and whatnot? Well, in the absence of any possible legislation or, a good idea that can solve this going forward, particularly in a world that I think is very much declining morally, and when we're seeing these things happen more, the Bible says this, and this is a psalm written by Asaph. This is in Psalm 73 in verse 16. The Bible says, "When I thought of how to understand this is the evil of the wicked," essentially, the actions of the wicked and how they prosper despite their evil actions. when I thought how to understand this, it was too painful for me until I went into the sanctuary of God and then I understood their end. What Asaph is ultimately getting at is, and what the sanctuary teaches, the ancient temple, is how God deals with injustice, how God brings justice to evil.
You're listening to the Breakfast Show podcast on Faith FM. Positively different.
Joined by myself, Lawson, got Dr. Dan in the studio and on the phone, none other than Dr. John Ashton. John, how are you going this morning?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Lawson.
Dude, I am so keen to talk about today's
topic. Are you craving
topic.
this topic?
I'm craving it. I'm craving to hear all about cravings, particularly in the area of food. Because look, I'm gonna be real. I like food, and sometimes I eat too much, and sometimes I might eat the wrong thing. But you know, it's because my body really felt like, hey, I really want to eat that, I really want to either eat that or I really want to drink that. You know, I really want to drink that can of Sprite. Give us some understanding. What is going on here? Why does our body do this? Actually, just before we jump into it, because our mind works in this way, right? To call us to eat things that aren't necessarily good for us, or to drink things that aren't necessarily good for us. I had a coach one time who said, I wish, because ultimately it gets into the stomach and it's not good down there. And I had a coach at one time who said, I wish your stomach could punch your brain in the face, like to sort it out for all the bad, because it has to bear the consequences for all the bad decisions that your brain makes. But hey, look, let's jump into it head first. How can we understand what are cravings? Where do they come from? How do they operate? And why do they affect us?
And are they a good thing or not?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so just looking at this from a scientific point of view, there are probably 4 classes of cravings that occur.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 different domains that affect our body.
Uh-huh.
And so I'll try and cover just briefly these in this topic. So I remember when I was a little boy, I must have been less than 8 years of age at the time, and I was listening to the radio, and they advertised Penguin ice creams, right? So this was a new chocolate-coated ice cream that came out on a stick. It cost 7 pence, which was fairly expensive. Like a fish was 9 pence, so reasonably expensive. And I remember it sounded so good the way they were advertising this on the radio to this little 8-year-old boy, that I pestered my mother. And eventually she said, well, okay, if you do some chores for me and go and go down the shop and get some things, you can buy one of these ice creams. And so that was how my mind was affected by this picture that was created as a little boy. Now, that's one type of cravings, and it's an immature type of craving, but it does affect us. We're affected by advertising that affects our brains, creates a desire in us. So that's sort of perhaps we could say a psychological craving, because I'd never tasted this thing before, right? But
Sure.
I mean, it did taste nice. It was certainly a luxury item back then.
Yeah.
Because, ice creams and that sort of thing were generally for just special occasions.
Yeah.
Now, another area that is fairly common and we often hear talked about is, and people make jokes about it, is women craving chocolate. Now, there's a reason for this, and this can particularly be at the end of their monthly cycle. What happens is at that particular time, dopamine levels drop within the body, and so this is a level that is related to our feelings of balance, of sort of emotional balance and this sort of thing. And chocolate is actually very high in magnesium. It's a very, very good source of magnesium. It's also at that time a very good source of iron as well. The iron in chocolate tends to be quite bioavailable for women. And so magnesium, however, is a precursor for the body to produce sufficient dopamine. So there is actually quite a biochemical association, nutritional biochemical association. Of course, all these ingredients come from the cocoa, and so you're eating chocolate to get the maximum benefit. If you're eating, say, a standard milk chocolate, which is only about 10, to come a lot of the associated fats and
the sugar in the milk.
But chocolate also. Yeah, sort of, so, the old saying, so many seconds on the lips, so many months on the hips sort of thing. But a quality dark chocolate, of course, is the answer to that. Chocolate is also a source of a feel-good chemical called phenylethylamine.
Yeah, okay.
This is a compound that actually helps us feel good, and hence the association of chocolate with romance and courting and this sort of thing.
Valentine's
so these
Day
are
gifts.
real biochemical, these are real nutritional chemistry factors that are underpinning this craving. So these cravings are good in a way.
So
and
you're
it's
saying
good
that
to satisfy these.
Okay, this is my question. It's good to give in. And like this should be
to certain cravings. Yes.
Well, I'm thinking particularly as a husband who loves my wife. Like I'm actually doing well by her biological, chemical, brain, gut connection. I'm doing well by her by feeding her chocolate
Once a month.
John is
you
like,
might earn more brownie points if you do it more often than that. But anyway,
awesome.
no. But I think it's good to recognise that, and good dark chocolate is good. Chocolate has many other benefits. Cocoa can help reduce blood pressure, for example. It's a source of many other good nutrients, very high in antioxidants, heart protective. A lot of good things are coming out, but of course a good quality chocolate. And of course the best way to get it is from cacao, buying the cacao powder, making yourself a cacao drink. And that's a good way to get these benefits. Now, some very interesting research has also come out of the Charles Perkins Centre at the University of Sydney. So this is an elite medical research centre associated with the University of Sydney.
Okay.
And it's interesting, the director of the centre, Professor Stephen Simpson, has done quite a bit of research in the area of nutrition and cravings. And he's come up with a concept, what he calls nutritional geometry. Now, you won't read about this in the popular stuff, but because this is sort of at the moment in the research level journals.
Okay.
But essentially the research that is done is showing that essentially we have a basic need of protein. Now, in the in the food world at the moment, we know protein is taking off as if you want to sell something, bung protein in it. So we've got breakfast cereals with extra protein, and probably
it used to be
with
fat
extra
free.
protein.
It used to be no MSG, and this is the next in the line.
Yeah, this is a new one. But one of the interesting things that has come out of his research is that we need protein to build the body structures as the cells get replaced and so forth. So we need a certain minimum amount of protein. And essentially, if we're not getting that in the foods that we eat, we will crave food in order to get more protein. And so what happens is, so we have we need a balance of protein and carbohydrate. So carbohydrates essentially provide our energy, so we can do a lot of work. That we do that. Now we need protein. Of course, in the olden days when women washed by hand on a scrubbing board, men chopped trees and dug coal mines by hand, and dug coal out by hand. Dug trenches. We need a lot of energy, right, to do that, and that's why generally people are quite slim, because we didn't get enough energy. We didn't, we needed all the food that we could get for energy. But with our more industrial lifestyle, with all our labour saving devices, we call them. We have an issue now that we can, eat too much energy food. Now, if we're not getting enough protein, we will desire food until we get enough protein.
Really?
So that's if we're eating a lot of carbs, like, Coke and chips and these sort of foods that are low in protein. We can keep eating, because we need this amount of protein. And what he found was that when he fed the diets of, he did this with sort of small animals, like rats and also with insects, that if he fed them low protein diets, they would eat and eat and eat until they reached the level of protein that they required. If he put them on a higher protein diet, then they ate less till they came back to the curve, to the level that they needed of protein.
Wow.
And hence this term nutritional geometry, because he plotted the data, and it would be a zigzag curve around the median line, the balance line of the protein carbohydrate ratio that you needed. So that's a very interesting thing there underpinning that.
So
the other one was
I'm just wondering, for us today, is it then that can we apply that into our diet immediately and say, hey, I can kick the cravings, for those who are desperate for a sugar fix or a big, carbohydrate fix or whatever it may be. It's if they're regularly eating, higher amounts of protein, then they won't have that, internal struggle or fight. Do you think?
Well, it should help. There are other factors that I'll talk about in a moment.
Sure.
But no, that's right. And so that's why it is important to eat, high quality foods. Now, generally the foods that are going, that are, eating a lot of just high pure carbohydrate foods, will generate these cravings. But most foods have quite a bit of protein in them. Like even potatoes have, 7% protein. Wheat and grains up where around 10, 12, 14% protein. And then you've got your legumes. So generally eating whole foods, right? Rather than the foods that have been split up where the proteins and so forth have been separated out. If we have the whole foods, and dietary fibre helps with satiety. So there's satiety factors as well that come in. Sure. But generally, having sufficient protein and so concentrating on foods that are high in protein, making sure that we're getting, sufficient legumes in particular, some nuts, if we eat meat or fish, and having good meals of those with vegetables. And vegetables, remember, have a lot of fibre and water in them. And so having, your cauliflower, your greens, and remember too that lettuce has more protein per calorie than meat. So filling up and eating quite a lot of greens, is a good way to get your protein, eating a lot of greens and very good quality protein too in a lot of these eggs, these sort of things. These are the foods that have our high protein. Now it's important. A lot of people go to the other extreme, just having protein. We need to remember that it's quite fascinating the way God set this up, that we need certain carbohydrates to enable, for example, the proteins to have access to certain parts of the body. Like, for example, our brain needs certain protein components that we call amino acids. And in order for those to become bioavailable in the brain, we need certain carbohydrates. And so that's why a combination of your protein foods with carbohydrate foods is a good thing to have together, and hence a balanced meal. So the balanced meal of the traditional protein dish with some vegetables is a good way to go, and avoid lots of cakes and biscuits and fries and these things. One of the reasons why there's a lot of awareness now that what they call the highly processed foods are not so good for us. These are foods that tend to be high in fat and salt and sugar. And so fat and sugar have virtually no protein in them. But these are foods that can stimulate pleasure in the brain. So this is a different mechanism. So this involves, again, foods that stimulate pleasure through the taste buds, and they then create a craving through a mental stimulation, right, where we have this pleasure response. We eat this food, we get pleasure, and therefore we crave to have that pleasure again, like fresh fries or whatever, or sweets, chocolate cake, all these sort of things. So that's a different mechanism again. And the way of overcoming that mechanism, an important way, is to sort of embrace the feeling, that really nice chocolate cake, but I'm not going to have that chocolate cake because it's not good for me. So you've got to take a logical approach. And the sad part is that some people are better at this than others. So some people have much better control over this, and this is just related to personality type. We're getting into a complex area there. But they're the different types of food cravings, and
so some of them are helpful for a balanced diet.
Yeah, awesome.
But some of them are not good.
Some of them are helpful, some of them are not. But John, thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight into a really important topic that, and I feel like I'm leaving, and I think many people will leave hearing this interview and going, oh, I can actually, restructure what I eat to help me to feel better and to be eating, the appropriate amount of food.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.